Welcome back. So this is going to be the 8th and final video on this mini series we've done on how to grow your own mushrooms. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to hydrate your cakes so that you can get multiple flushes out of each one of your bins. So I have everything that I need for this step here. Of course, we're going to go with gloves. Now, as you get your flushes up to the 3-4 flushes, then you can actually kind of start to relax on the sanitation, because really with 2 bags of Uncle Ben's rice, you're only going to get 5, maybe 6 flushes. But for the first couple flushes, you definitely want to keep your sanitary practices up. So I'm still using my rubbing alcohol and gloves whenever I handle these bins. Now, what I have here is I have my water. That's what we're gonna rehydrate these cakes with. Now you can use tap water, but if you have the means of getting your hands on some distilled water, or in this case, reverse osmosis water, you wanna use that for the first couple flushes. That's just gonna rule out any contaminants in the water and make sure you get to that 4th and 5th flush. So I filled up about 1.5 gallons. That's about all I need to fill one of these and hydrate this cake. And I've put a plastic bag over it because I don't want any contaminants to get in the water. Once I'm ready to use it, take the bag off and we'll get going. Now I've also, before I put water in this bucket, I sprayed it out with my rubbing alcohol, wiped it out, just ruling out any contamination from this bucket. This is especially important when you're rehydrating for the first or even second time. Like I said, you get 3 flushes under your belt, then you can kind of start to relax and not worry so much about contamination, because it's really a race against the clock to get all the mushrooms grown before the contamination finally overtakes the tub. So let's get a close look at our bin here. So here's our cake here, and we are looking pretty dry in there. Now, if you touch it, it's got a little bit of a give to it, but not much. You don't want to wait until it's stiff, or else you really run the chance of hurting the mycelium inside. Now, the other thing I like to do is just lift up the corner like this. Now, if it's bending, then that means there's still enough moisture. But if the whole thing kind of comes up like this and it's barely bending, that means that we're ready to start hydrating this cake. So that's what we're gonna do right now. You're gonna wanna get yourself a gallon-size Ziploc bag. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to wipe it down with my isopropyl alcohol here. Okay, wiping it down on both sides, because this is gonna weigh down the cake, which is gonna wanna float. And what I use is I'll use the biggest book I can fit in this with still being able to seal it. In my case, an encyclopedia works great. So I have an encyclopedia that fits perfectly in here and allows me to seal the bag. There's plenty of weight in here. And if your book's a little less light, then you might need to get 2 bags and just use 2 books. But really, you just have to kind of experiment with something. All you're looking for is something nice and clean that's gonna keep that cake underwater. So this part is really rather simple. Take your lid off here and take your lid off here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lightly pour. Don't worry if you get it on top of the cake, it's gonna happen. But I'm just looking, once it starts kind of buoying up, I'll fill a little more. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to place this, and you know what I'm gonna do? Just because it's the first or second flush, just gonna give it one last wipe down so that I can rule out that no contamination is gonna happen because of this bag. Then I'm simply gonna place this right on top. This is perfect, it sinks. Everything is underwater right now. That's exactly what you want. And I'm gonna leave it. So the rule of thumb is you want a couple hours of soaking per inch. Now I just soak for 3 to 5 hours in these tubs and it turns out perfect. If it's 3, great. If it's 5, fine. Don't worry about like, oh, it's underwater. How long can it hold its breath? Like it doesn't work like that. So you're not gonna really over soak it unless you go like 6, 12 hours for a couple inches. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just leave this for 3 to 5 hours, and then I'm simply gonna drain it right back out and start exactly where we started in the 7th video, which is just start fruiting again, which means we're just going to be airing it out 3 to 4 times a day, keeping those temperatures in the 70s or even 80s, and just wait for the next round of mushrooms. Just 3 days later after rehydrating this cake, and we can already see mushrooms growing up all throughout the substrate. Now you'll notice that some of these stumps have turned a yellowish hue. That is not contamination. What it is actually mycelium pea. There's 2 reasons why your mycelium will start secreting what looks and almost smells like piss. And that is either your conditions are too wet or that it is fighting off a minor contamination. Mycelium piss is actually a healthy sign for a cake because it means that its immunity system is fighting off these contaminants. The final product is still perfectly edible. So let's go to this tub here, and you can see that this is starting to have signs of that mycelium piss in spots. Once again, totally normal and actually a good sign. Even if the whole tub turns yellow, which usually actually happens by the 3rd, 4th, 5th flush, it does not mean that the fruits that you grow are not edible. Everything is perfectly fine, and it's just the mycelium working its magic. So before I wrap this up, I want to show you how to take a spore print, because once you've found a mushroom you really like growing and grows well in your conditions, you're going to want to keep those genetics around. And luckily, it's really easy to take a spore print, put it right back in a syringe, and just rinse and repeat all the steps that we've done to just continuously grow the kind of mushroom that you're growing. So let's hop into how to make a spore print. So I have everything I need here to make my spore print. Now I have 4 freshly cut mushrooms. These came from a 2nd flush, which are better for spore prints because the mushrooms tend to be much bigger than the 1st flush. So I just cut these and they are ready to make my spore prints. Now I have a glass bowl that I've cleaned out with rubbing alcohol. I also have a dropper that is half filled with reverse osmosis water. You can also use distilled water. I made sure to kind of run through some rubbing alcohol in that dropper. So I'm going to take this shot glass and I'm going to pour just a little bit of rubbing alcohol in here as well. What I'm doing is I'm disinfecting everything now. So I'm going to spray this paper towel and take just a normal piece of foil and I'm going to disinfect this as well. Keeping everything sanitary is of the utmost importance here. Now what I have here is just an empty spore syringe that I've had laying around. So what I'm going to do is I am going to suck up some of this rubbing alcohol in here and disinfect the syringe. Just shake it around a little, squirt it right back out. I'm also going to take my needle here and I'm going to disinfect this. So I'm just going to place it right back on the syringe here, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to suck up some of this rubbing alcohol and spray it right back out. So you're going to want to take a couple good pumps of this just to get that excess rubbing alcohol out of there. And then I'm just going to cap this needle off, and this needle is sterilized. So I'm going to put it aside, and I'm actually going to use this glass bowl just to make sure no contaminants get on that. Everything that's under this bowl is going to be completely sanitized. So I'm going to take my sanitized trimmers here, and I am ready to make my spore print. So what you want to do is cut just above the gills, as close to the gills as you can get without disturbing them. And then you're going to want to remove the veil if it hasn't already been completely removed. So I'm just going to use my hands here, and we are ready to just place this right on our foil. Now you can just use one cap to make a spore print, but what I like to do is I just use two. You're not wasting anything because you can still use the product when it's done dropping its spores. So I figure the more spores, the merrier for when it comes to success of getting a spore print to inoculate your bags. So I'm doing the exact same thing here. Just cut it as close to the gills as possible and place it right next to this spore print. Then you want to take your water here. This is just a dropper of RO or distilled water. And you want to put 1, 2, even 3 drops of water on top. What this does is it triggers the mushroom to start dropping its spores, and it's going to speed up the process. The last step is just to move everything under the bowl so that it stays nice and sanitized. Now I'm just going to place this here while I deal with this shot glass, which we also want to go under the bowl. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour out this excess rubbing alcohol right back in my spray bottle, air it out a little, and then I'm going to place this shot glass right under the bowl with the syringe and the prints. After 24 hours, enough spores have dropped from these 2 caps for us to make a good spore syringe. So we are ready for that step. I have RO or distilled water in this shot glass, which I first cleaned out with rubbing alcohol. I also have a plastic freezer bag, which I sanitized just for the hell of it, but you want something brand new. Now I'm going to take this bowl off. Everything in here is already sanitized, so we are ready to go. I'm simply going to just dip this sanitized syringe into the water and fill it up with 10 cc's of water here. Then I'm just going to squirt it right in my already sanitized shot glass here, so we know we have 10 cc's worth of water in this glass. I'm then going to take this sterilized straight razor that I have, and I'm going to remove the caps. Now sometimes you can't even see the prints. Let's get a nice close-up here. And this one on the right dropped more prints than the one on the left. That's normal. Really, even though it doesn't look like a lot, there are millions of spores in these 2 spore prints here. So what I do is I will just get this black soot-like substance here, which are our spores, and then I'm going to drop them right into our shot glass of 10 cc's of water. Try to get as many of the spores as you can, but you don't have to get every single one of them. Like I said, there's millions. So what we're doing is just really scraping everything off. it's almost easier just to pour it in after you scrape like this. But don't forget that there's going to be a buildup on the razor, so make sure you get that in there as well. So I'm just going to try and scrape one last time, get those last bits that I couldn't get. This is a nice little chunk here, and into the glass it goes. So you can see, I mean, there's not that much, but there are millions of spores, and you only need a couple to interact with each other to have the inoculation process work. So what I do is I just suck in all the water, and I almost stir it by just squirting it right back out. You only have to do this a couple times to really make sure that you get most of the spores into the syringe, which is the ultimate goal here. So I'm gonna do one last uptake into the syringe. I'm gonna tilt the glass, make sure that I get all the water that I can. And then just like in the movies, give it a nice squirt up, get all the air out of there. I'm gonna place my cap right back on this needle, and this is ready to go. So if you want, you can inoculate your bags right now, just the way we did in the first part of this video series. And if you're not ready for it now, then just throw it in your nice, clean Ziploc bag and store it in the fridge. This syringe will stay good for months in the fridge. So one thing that I never really got into in this video series was the use of light. Now, I said that I like to just keep my mushrooms in the corner of the grow room. So really the lights are on either 18 or 12 hours a day anyway. Now, mushrooms can grow in the dark without any light. But there are some people that say that it's good for the circadian rhythm of the mushroom, and it gives it a spot to grow too. Now, whether it grows better or not is really in debate. There's no real way to tell because every mushroom's gonna grow differently anyway. So even if you have a tub side by side with another tub, it doesn't really matter because you just might have stronger mycelium in one tub than the other. So really, even if you get results that you can differentiate, it's not very conclusive. For the most part, they will grow in the dark or in your closet or your laundry room, wherever it may be. So don't worry about light. So that's gonna do it. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I will answer them. So from me to you, happy growing, and I will see you in the next Chronicle.